My name is Anne Brown and I grew up on Battery Point, and then I've come back to live here for the last 34 years and hopefully for quite a few years to come.
And my name is Victor Shaw. I'm the rector of St George's, Battery Point, and I've been living here for the past 6 years.
I moved to Battery Point when I was about 4 years old, and shortly after that I saw the girl who was my best friend go up the street, and so I followed her and she went to St George's Church. And so I joined the Sunday school and went to the Sunday school right through childhood and followed on from there for a number of years till I went overseas. And then I grew away from the church for a while, and I came back when I was asked whether I would stand for State Commission of the Girl Guides, and I thought, how do I show that I promised to do my best to do my duty to God? And I thought, go to church. And from there, St George's has really helped me to grow in my understanding of my faith, and it's been a wonderful experience to actually be able to meet week by week with fellow parishioners and to learn more about God and who I am as a child of God.
I came to Battery Point 6 years ago or so to start as the Children and Families Minister at St George's. I just finished my theological studies, and I had a friend who was a pastor down the road in Kingston who was back in Sydney where I was studying, trying to recruit people to work with him. And he was talking with me. We worked out it wasn't going to be a good fit, but he said, look, I've got a friend who's at St George's who's looking for someone. And so we started talking, came down and visited in about, I think, September 2012 with my family for an interview to get to know the church. And we just fell in love with the church, with St George's as a place. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of the world, and with Battery Point as well. And so then we moved down and actually arrived here in Battery Point on the day of the bushfires in 2013, which was a very interesting introduction to Tasmania. I'd sort of coming from the mainland, thought it's going to be a lot cooler, and it was 35 degrees at 11:30 that night, and been driving through ash falling down, so it was quite a surreal experience, but very warmly welcomed by the church. And we've just loved every minute of it being at St George's. It's a beautiful, warm and welcoming church family. We're away from our family, our parents and relatives, and we feel that we've got been very well embraced by the church family and have lots of surrogate aunties and uncles and grandmas and grandpas who spend time with our kids, who we can hang out with, and we've found lots of good friends here as well. And it's a real joy to be able to lead the community here at St George's. About 3 years ago, I finished up being an assistant at the church and took over as the rector. There's always new people at St George's. One of the great joys is I'm always getting to meet lots of different people. Of course, we always have tourists because Battery Point is right down near the harbour, and we get lots of cruise ships and others coming to this wonderful historic part of Hobart, and many people want to come and see the church because it's such a beautiful building, and also join us for worship on a Sunday morning. And so that's a real joy to meet people from all over the world who are visiting. We also have very often visiting academics who are at the University of Tasmania. And so that's a great delight for me to get to know different people who are studying in different fields of God's creation. And so that's always very interesting, learning about those different disciplines. And you couldn't kind of write these things. You couldn't plan these things in terms of who comes through the doors because there's so many interesting people.
One of the, actually I think there are probably three things in particular I'd like to share with you that I have appreciated about St George's. When I started coming as a young girl, then there was a very vibrant Sunday school, and there was also a large choir, and there were community activities as well. And in fact, I remember playing badminton in the hall, for instance, and there were many other activities that occurred. And over the course of my lifetime, there have been quite a variety of ups and downs in the church, and I'm pleased to say that the church is on the rise again in St George's, and some of the exciting things are that we have a very vibrant kids' church, and we also have an exciting choir that we enjoy every week. And the other thing I particularly enjoy is that we have many ways that we're able to reach out to the community, and that the community is able to come and join either with us in our activities, or otherwise they're able to use our spaces for various meetings, for ballet and dance, for keep fit exercises, girl guides. We have the headquarters of the Hand Weavers, Spinners and Guys Guild of Tasmania, and many other activities as well. The church has wonderful acoustics, so there are many concerts of many genres held in the church itself, and of course that means to say that our singing on a Sunday morning can be quite blessed as well, and there are times when you feel as if the roof is being raised, and it's partly because of the acoustics that this is a wonderful joy. St George's is a very welcoming church as a community when we meet together, and I like to think that when people are using our spaces they also feel welcomed, and there are many ways that people use these spaces for their activities. One of the activities that appeals to many people in Battery Point is that several years ago our tower was floodlit, and so it's the community of Battery Point that actually contributes year by year so that the tower remains floodlit, and that gives us a lot of feedback, in fact, funnily enough, and we find out that people really enjoy seeing the church building and what it means to them. For instance, we had quite a few people who said, well, they went to bed according to when the floodlights turned off at night, or other people who have said that they've actually found that because the tower was lit, it helped them when they were new to Hobart to find their way home. So it's a very interesting church, quite different from many others, but also many similarities. I, soon after I moved to Battery Point, started at Lady Gowrie Preschool, as it was known then, and I still have quite a few friends who I've gone right through preschool, school, and even some university with. And my best friend lived just outside Arthur's Circus, and we lived in Hampden Road. And so we used to play in Arthur's Circus. We were able to play tennis in the street because there weren't anywhere near as many cars as there are today. Over the course of the years, the trees and the swings in Arthur's Circus itself have changed in position. And when I first knew Arthur's Circus, there was a central telegraph pole with wires going off to each of the houses, rather like a black and white maypole. And there were a lot of children in Battery Point in those days as well, and so it's quite a gathering point. One of the things we do as a church is that we go carol singing on Christmas Eve around the streets of Battery Point, and we always include Arthur's Circus as part of that. And I was just thinking the other day that in younger or earlier years that there would be children coming out of each of the houses to join us as we sang there, and some would be on the swings and others would just be standing around singing with us as part of my special memories of Christmas Eve. And those memories continue. We've been carol singing now for about 40 years, and it's a highlight for many people on Christmas Eve. We every now and again would find out that the door to the Battery had been left open under Princess Park, and so word would go out amongst all the children, and we would go exploring down there with torches or candles. And it's now I don't think they ever leave the gate open anymore. Times have changed.
I think I went there once. I think it was one Mona event.
Yes.
They opened it up specially, and I can see the attraction
Yes.
for young children. It was lots of fun.
Yes. And the swings in Princess Park also used to be on the top of the park, not down the bottom where they are, or where the playground is today. And so we would swing there, and we would look over Derwent River, And we had all these dreams as children.
Okay. So St George's was consecrated, I think, and it was the 26th of May, 1838, by Bishop William Grant Borton, who was the first and only bishop of Australia. Before him, Australia and the Anglican Church was part of the Diocese of Calcutta, colonial English times. And then after that, the Diocese of Australia split into, Diocese of Sydney, Diocese of Tasmania, actually, in 1842. Anyway, so that's when the church opened. 1847, the tower was built. In 1850, 51, the schoolrooms at the back of the church were opened, which was the first school in the area. And the rector at that time, Henry Phipps Fry, was very involved in the community. In 1843, the church built an almshouse for destitute men, where the site of Albura Street School is now. That building subsequently been demolished. So that was 1843. He and his wife started a Sunday school, the first education for children in the area. And he was also very involved in marrying lots of convicts. It was kind of socially, they weren't particularly well respected at the time. And so many of the churches thought it was a bit beneath them to do that. But our records during the 1840s are full of Henry Fry marrying convicts. He's doing 5 or 6 weddings a weekend, so quite remarkable. He was there, very active clergyman. Wrote a hymn book for the church as well, and at our 175th anniversary we actually sang one of the hymns which he'd written, which was really fantastic, and we've still got a couple of copies of that hymn book in our museum. He finished up in 1858, 59, something like that, and was succeeded by the man who would later become Canon George Banks Smith, and he was at the church for 42 years as our longest serving rector. He was the last government paid chaplain in Australia, I think. When he started, I think there were quite a number of chaplains who were paid by the Crown, but by the end of his career, when he retired, actually I think died.
Yes,
he died. Didn't retire. He died. He was the last government paid chaplain, so he was there for a long time. And I have to confess, the other day, it was a year or so ago, I was looking at online at some archival material, and I found a newspaper article which was quite remarkable. It was a review of St George's, printed in the Mercury. It was called Our Preachers Number 11. So clearly there was a series where they were visiting different churches in Hobart, and they'd write up a story about, this is what the sermon was about, and this is what the church was like and whatnot. And I have to say, it was a little bit embarrassing because the reviewer was scathing of Banks Smith's preaching. One of the lines that just stuck in my memory, and this is kind of a bit awkward as a preacher myself. I sort of think I never want to do this, never want to be like this. But the reviewer said, I never knew there was such a world of misery and woe until I heard Canon Banks Smith's O's. So I just think, oh, Lord, save me from that and save my congregation from that. So he was there for a while. One of the other interesting stories, actually, from the history of the church, 1920, the Reverend Thomas Quigley, his first sermon at St George's was actually against the White Australia policy. He was kind of in the aftermath of the First World War and the peace conference in Versailles, I think it was. He was reflecting on how the Allied powers had not treated China and Japan well in the settlement after the war, and he said in the sermon, he said things like the phrase "yellow peril" should be forgotten, and the unequal treatment of other races was the very negation of Christianity. And he encouraged, it was a Mother's Day service, and he was encouraging mothers to teach their children well so that people would be treated equally, and Lord willing there would be avoiding the crime of war. So it was quite a remarkable sermon for that time. But in many ways, just preaching what the church has always preached right from the first pages of the Bible, that we're all created equal in God's sight. And that has to have translation in how we treat each other. During the war, now this is just before your time, and somewhat before your time. But one of the things that I'm sure people remember from when you were a child is the window. The church is a beautiful stained glass window.
With the colours burnt into
the colours burnt into it. So it's quite a different design, quite a different construction of this window. But there was Japanese reconnaissance planes seen flying up the Derwent, and people were afraid that Hobart was going to get bombed like Darwin had, and they thought the church, St George's, might be bombed, and so they didn't want to lose this window, this beautiful window, quite unique, and so it was removed. And we've actually got newspaper with a photo of it being taken out of the church. So yes, that was one of the other interesting moments in our history. And then when you were a girl, who's the rector again? Was it Alfie? Alfie Reynolds?
Yeah, Alfred Reynolds.
Yeah. And now Alfie was a bit of an artist.
Oh, he was a great artist actually, and he drew most of Battery Point, and they would appear in monthly newsletters which were delivered right around our suburb of Battery Point. So we have a lot of those, and he was quite a renowned artist actually, but that was a sideline to being rector of our parish.
Yeah, actually, as speaking about Alfie and his artwork, one of the fun things about being the rector is that everyone who has this connection with the church, who kind of comes through, just falls in love with it. And I'm always meeting people who are kind of returning mementos from the church, either from a relative or that they want it to be archived or something. And I've received actually several paintings that Alfie's done that people have found that they want to return to the church. And one of the other lovely things is that Alfie's son Peter is still a member of the church, and he's part of the choir as well. In terms of a couple of other history things for the church, there's a big restoration effort in the 1970s with Ernie Bevan, who was the rector at that time. And then, I guess as you were saying, the church has gone through some ups and downs, but really since the mid-2000s, there's been a new lease of life in the church. With my predecessor, John Langlois, his wife Rosalind, who's a marvellous concert pianist. She's the one who started the choir and the kids' church we started at that time. And so I feel very much that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants and building on the work that has happened beforehand. And of course, at the moment we're just about to start, thanks to some generous funding from different sources, a major restoration project where we're actually replacing whole some of the stone that's really decayed. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest restoration projects that we've done actually in the life of the church. One of the other interesting things about St George's is, of course, the rectory next door. It's a great privilege to live next door to church. It's a very short commute. It's a beautiful old house. And in 1896, I think 28th of October, foundation stone was laid by the Bishop of Tasmania at the time, and his name was Henry Montgomery. I guess has some profile here in Tasmania, but he's most famous for his son, who was General Bernard Montgomery, or Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery of El Alamein in the Second World War, one of the top British commanders in the Second World War. And so he grew up around here as a young boy, not in Battery Point particularly. I think he lived in Bishop's Court, which is on Fitzroy Street, which is actually in our parish boundaries. Right, yeah. So there you go. It is still part of the parish in Battery Point, although I guess you'd say it's probably Sandy Bay. But anyway, and everyone who's lived in the rectory seems to have really appreciated it as well. That Battery Point is full of history, and so I've had the privilege of meeting different predecessors and their families who have lived in the rectory. At my induction as rector, John and Ros were there, and Jane Bevans, so Ernie Bevans' wife, Carol Jolly, her husband was the rector there before John, and I've also met a few times Millicent Prescott, who's she's 104 now, I think. Absolutely incredible. She's a marvel. And then we've had Lawrence Nash. He was there 1944 to 52. His daughter has come and visited, and she sent me a whole bunch of photos of her and her siblings growing up in the rectory, which was magnificent. And then A.A. Bennett, who was there from 1934 to 1944, his, I think I'm going to get it wrong, but his daughter and stepson have also come to visit as well. And they all speak with great affection of growing up in the rectory. So my kids are enjoying that as well. And it's a good legacy to be part of.
After growing up in Battery Point and getting admitted to the bar, I then left home and I moved to another part of Hobart, and then I went overseas for a while, came back and lived in the northwest of the state, and I got a job back in Hobart and I was looking for a place to live. And I didn't think it was going to be Battery Point because by that stage house prices had increased substantially, so I thought it would be another part of Hobart. And my mother said when I was looking at one particular place, well, why would you move out there? Because you don't have any activities that you do in that part of Hobart. And so it would mean to say you'd have to hop in the car to go anywhere. So this house that I'm now living in came up for sale, and I went around and had a look at it and fell in love straight away. So much so I didn't try the water pressure, which I'd done in every other house I'd looked at that I thought I might be remotely interested. Whereas the plumber who came around the other day said I've got the best water pressure that he knows of in Hobart. Yes. Well, one of the joys of living in Battery Point is that you don't really need a car very often, and so you find that your car will be parked on the street for upwards of a week, and also your petrol expenses and maintenance of a car are much less than any other suburb because we enjoy living in a walking village. And so you've got people walking past your place on a very frequent basis. So that's one of the enjoyable pastimes is gardening in the front garden, and you can chat to them all. And also you get quite a lot of exercise because you find that you walk everywhere, and you find that the rest of the people in Battery Point do as well. At the moment, the council is doing some work outside my place, and they've been closing off the street. And they had a sign up saying local traffic only. And for the first month, we had a lot of difficulty because all of Battery Point thinks they're local, not just the people who live in my street.
So, Anne,
yes,
both of us love St George's.
Yes.
It's got a great history.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think the future lies for St George's and for Battery Point?
I think one of the things that I would like to see built on even further are the links between St George's and the community. And occasions that I particularly enjoy are the carol singing around Battery Point on Christmas Eve.
Lots of fun, isn't
Yes, it is, and it's so appreciated by so many people.
We actually have requests, don't we?
We do.
Like people, they say, "Can you stop outside of our house?" And unfortunately, we can't fill them all each year, so we do try and get around though.
Yeah. And another one is that whenever our hall is used for an election, and so we hold what's called a fair, and it's something's been going on for all of my life outside the hall on the green, and that's become a lovely way too of getting to meet a lot of people in the community and for the community to gather, and I particularly enjoy that day as well. I find I go home pretty tired afterwards, and so every year I think, at the end of the fair we'll sort out everything before we put everything back in the shed, but we don't. But another time that was really good was the Australian Garage Sale Day. We were actually able to link in with that. And so while we were sorting out everything in the shed, people came along and they bought things as well. And we had a trailer that we put things on that we thought were just going to the tip, and we said you can have those for free, and it was amazing how much of that went as well, which was really nice. So I love the opportunities we have to share with the community. And one of our longest traditions is actually the Mariners Service that we hold each year. And because Battery Point has such a long maritime history, where originally most people who lived on Battery Point were actually connected with the sea in some way or another through their occupations. And so we still hold that service, which was started in, I think, 1938.
1934?
Oh, 1934, yes.
1934, yeah.
And so that's a really interesting service. And several years ago, I was in Italy, and we got involved in by mistake really, but one of the cathedrals was having a Saint Donato's Day, and apparently Saint Donato was one of those saints who managed to walk around with his head that had been chopped off under his arm.
Yeah, right, okay.
And they, yes, as happens over there, and all the ladies were in national costume, and they all had baskets of either dried or plastic flowers and dolls, which were blessed, and then they walked around the neighbourhood with a piano accordion in front and the priests behind. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I suppose that for them is as normal as our Mariner service is, and if they came to our Mariner service, I wonder what they would make of that when their service, for some reason which I didn't understand with the language differences, involved the dolls and the flowers and the...
Well, I suppose, we've got all the colours from the different maritime organisations that get paraded around, and there's a ship's bell and the governor turns up. It's lots of fun.
It is.
Look, I really enjoy all our community events as well. The Election Day Fair, carolling around the suburb is so much fun. Pancakes, that's right. Shrove Tuesday we have pancakes. We invite the suburb to come and join us for dinner, which is lots of fun as well. And everybody seems to get into that. And we have a bit of some games there as well. And my hope is that we'll be able to continue to do these sorts of things. So yeah, that's my hope for the future, is we'll continue to do that and be a blessing to Battery Point as a village, and hopefully wider as well.
And while we don't get it right all the time in our own lives... My
goodness.
No. But we know that we can be forgiven and start again. And that to me is really important as well. And but if everyone had the opportunity to feel loved, and which they do have in fact, and could recognise that, then our world would be a better world.